Ready?
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our mBaaS and API Management Better Together webinar. I'm Caroline Murphy. I head up product marketing here at Convey, and we're lucky today to be joined by Jiku Venkat, who's our VP of product. And before we get started here, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be holding questions until the end, but then we will be taking some. So if you have any questions, you can see in your questions tab in your GoToWebinar viewer. And please feel free to put questions in there. I'll be keeping track of them and answering those at the end. And any that we don't get to, we'll do our best to follow up with you on email. So with that said, we're happy to introduce Jiku and take it away.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd like to first off welcome everyone and thank you all for attending this webinar. What we're going to do today is basically give you an overview of API management, why people buy an API management product, what are the various use cases that drive people to buy API management, what API management is, and we'll do a parallel construction for mBaaS and why people look at mBaaS, why people buy mBaaS, and what mBaaS is. And then we'll get into talking about mobile application requirements in detail and what that drives, and then get into how you fulfill those mobile app requirements with the combination of mBaaS and API management, and how everything comes together. Finally, we'll make it all real for you by giving you a quick demonstration of some of the features that we discuss in this presentation to make it all come together. And finally, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to get started by talking to you about API management. So what drives API management buying scenarios? What are the use cases that customers care about and drives them to buy API management products that are out there? And the source for a lot of this information is a Forrester report on sizing the market for API management solutions that was done very recently. There's also been a number of other Forrester and Gartner research reports on API management that have formed the basis of some of what we're going to talk about today. So the number one reason for that people are looking at API management solutions is to build and make available data and system services to their partners and to their supplier networks. So let's say I'm working with a partner and in terms of managing inventory, for example, I need to make sure that they have access to my inventory system. And I want to standardize how they get access to that system, be able to meter it, and so on. So I buy an API management solution that enables my partner to get access to that inventory information. That's just one example of a business-to-business use case that drives people to look at API management. And obviously, what am I doing with that data? I'm building applications. I'm doing something useful with that data to build applications across both the customer's organization and their partner's organization. The other key reason to look at API management solution is to deliver data and, again, systems services to mobile applications. So mobile applications want access to data that resides inside corporate systems, and how do I make that data available to the mobile application in a standardized, secure, consistent way? Again, API management provides a solution to that. The other reason to look at API management is to extend the life of legacy systems. For example, if I have a legacy system that doesn't quite understand modern protocols or modern data formats, then I can build an API management solution that does some transformation and some integration over this legacy system. So this data is available now for use by other systems and services within my organization in a form that is easily consumable and modernized is a word that analysts and others use. When I'm modernizing applications, this is something that I can do to extend the life again of legacy systems. The other is the API itself becomes the product, right? So I am a buyer that actually has valuable data. Dun & Bradstreet is an example of a potential client of API management that has valuable information, and they want to make this information available to their customers, right? And there are people that pay to get access to this data and or the analysis of that data, and I make that available through an API that enables my customers to build interesting products by using that API. So it actually becomes a revenue generation and it enables new business models for the customer. The other one is, the ability to have open APIs, so I can do free exchange of data and build a community of developers that take my data, match it up with other data, and create interesting applications for me to build a community around what I have in terms of data and platform, and do it in a very open way. It's another buying scenario for API management. And finally, the Internet of Things, the coming Internet of Things, including wearables, and being able to provide access to the IoT data. If I have an IoT product, like a thermostat or a awareness plug or a light bulb, and I want to make this data available for people to build interesting applications around this thing that I have, a product that I have. It's another buying scenario for API management. So in order to fulfill these requirements, these buying scenarios, API management really provides a lot of features. The idea is to map the underlying data schema to provide a level of abstraction so that I can standardize access to all data that are available in that system of record. So API management platforms typically provide a lot of features, including things like transformation integration, which refers to basically transforming the API to well-understood standardized protocols, data formats, integrating with, again, legacy systems, other proprietary systems, whether they be XML, SOAP, enterprise service buses, databases, or identity provider services like SAML-based identity provider service to make that available. There is also features around the lifecycle management of an API, including version controls and updating of the APIs, compatibility, things like that, end of life of certain API features. So the entire lifecycle management of the API and providing features to support that lifecycle management. Security, of course, is a very, very important piece, which is why people look at API management, so to provide access to data in a secure way, in a controlled way, with access control features and so on. And also to provide a user portal for people that are interacting with that API that allows them to collaborate. And again, we talked about this building of a community around your API product to facilitate openness. And so that's another important feature of a lot of the API management solutions. And finally, to allow for API design and creation, right, to enable your users to be able to modify APIs to existing APIs, as well as to put in requests for new ones and be able to create new ones. So these are some of the features of API management, again, to fulfill these buying scenarios that we just discussed. In the mBaaS case now, just to draw some parallels, the mBaaS buying scenarios are primarily driven by applications, right? Applications that people want to build, whether these are native mobile applications that could be business to consumer, business to business, business to employee type applications, whether they are native mobile or mobile web applications where I'm building a web application, but it's a mobile-first web application, as well as building applications around wearables and the Internet of Things. And this is the primary buying scenario for mBaaS. People are looking at mBaaS to make it cheaper, faster, more efficient for them to develop, test, deliver applications, and continue to maintain them on an ongoing basis. And in terms of, what are the typical features of an mBaaS that you need to enable the build of applications, there are a lot of people in the industry that are converging around a 4-tier architecture with a set of features that enable these use cases, whether they be native mobile or web mobile or the IoT types of applications, where you have a services tier starting down at the bottom, which gives you access to either existing on-prem or enterprise data and services, as well as third-party services for things such as social identities or file storage in terms of box and notification services and things like that, that are the services layer. And then there's an aggregation layer that federates these services, also provides a way for you to discover what is available in terms of endpoints, and we'll show you this available within this service. And like I mentioned earlier, to provide both protocol and data format translations. For example, either XML to JSON or REST to SOAP type transformation, or SOAP to REST type transformations. And then there is a delivery tier where, based on the needs of the mobile application or IoT application that a user of an mBaaS solution might be building, you want to optimize content for proper display on a device. For example, on an iPad, you might be able to do more than you can on a phone, and a little less on an IoT type device, those types of things. Caching content for high performance delivery, analytics to track how people are using the app, as well as what APIs or what flows they are accessing from a backend perspective. And finally, there is a client tier, right, which is vitally important on how all of this backend services, these systems of record down at the bottom, or the aggregation layer is completely abstracted from the front-end developer that is actually developing the mobile app, whether, again, it's a client app or a wearable or an Internet of Things, so that they can focus their time and efforts on experience delivery, and all of the backend interaction is completely abstracted from them, and also make it easy for them to optimize what they need from the backend without having to go back down all the way to the services tier. That they are able to do things at mobile speed, and we'll talk more about the speed as well. So these are some of the features that drive the need for mBaaS, because mBaaS really does a lot in the aggregation tier, in the delivery tier, as well as providing the abstraction for the client tier. So we've talked about what API management is, why people buy it, what mBaaS is, why people buy it. Now let's take a closer look at these mobile apps that we talked about, and what are some of the unique requirements that drive mobile apps, right? The key thing with mobile apps are that, although we are saying mobile apps, they are really omni-channel, right? So you have different types of mobile devices, different platforms. Sometimes you're building hybrid apps that cross between, native mobile experiences as well as a mobile-first web experience. So they're really truly omni-channel, if you will. They need to exist on multiple devices, be developed across multiple platforms, which leads us to this next point around, there's a diverse set of tools, languages, frameworks that are being used to build these types of applications. And there's a lot of diversity there, from JavaScript-based frameworks like PhoneGap to native frameworks like what you get with iOS and Android and the native Windows Phone platforms, and everything in between. And when you're building a mobile app, unlike in the days of building desktop applications, you have to be able to manage connectivity because these devices, unlike the PCs, do not have a persistent connection to the network. So they are, transient connections to the network, which means you'd have to detect connectivity and do the right thing to optimize the user experience. And this is a very, very critical requirement with mobile apps. Offline and being able to access and use the application while you're offline, which means you have some client-side caching capability, is another key requirement, especially for true mobile use case that have true mobility with them, where people are switching from network to network, and sometimes they might be in remote areas where there is no network connectivity. They still need to be able to do something useful with the application. And synchronization of data, which goes hand in hand with the offline caching, being able to sync data when you're connected, so you can make modifications to the data while you're disconnected and be able to sync that back very transparently is a key requirement. And mobile always drives new features, new data patterns, new content that needs to be stored, retrieved. And we talked about the network, but there's other contextual awareness that needs to be built into the app, including things like location service, for example, and be able to do things in the app based on the context. Access to the fingerprint sensor is another contextual piece that becomes an important requirement, and the ability to be able to do this in a very platform neutral way. And finally, security, right? Especially when you're talking about enterprise use cases, security is a key requirement for these mobile applications. Now, with enterprise mobility, the key is, how do I connect people, their devices, and the data that is locked up again, sometimes within the enterprise firewall, together to enable what's next. And what's next is a number of new use cases. Mobile apps are being built to generate, to make existing business processes more efficient, to drive new business processes, new ways to generate revenues, therefore new commercial models, new ways to engage with both customers and partners, and be able to look at data and perform analysis on that data and drive campaigns that, again, that you are not able to do before. And all this needs to be done with the security and governance that the enterprise needs to already has in place, and also be done at scale. And scale is an important thing because across people, devices, and data, mobile drives, mobile really has a different scale requirement. For example, you're dealing with 10 times more people if you want to reach out as a consumer company to all your consumers, right? And they have different identities, including their social identities that you need to be cognizant of when you're building your mobile application, as well as enterprise identities and how the two things come together. The number of devices is, there's a lot of data around this. There's people saying one order up to 3 orders of magnitude more devices that when compared to the traditional web world, and therefore the scaling again becomes very important when you're having to deal with that, because people have multiple devices, including mobile, tablet, desktop, and the coming revolution with wearables and the Internet of Things, and the data associated with all of these people and devices. So, and new data that is going to drive these new business models. As well as access to public API services, when we get into how that connects into API management, as well as access to social data that people have. I want to do something in the app and post that to Facebook or post that to LinkedIn, to be able to do things like that that are very contextual as well as personal. Are some of the challenges when you're building these enterprise mobile apps. So how do you fulfill all of these requirements that we just talked about, that the mobile apps are driving? So, so you have these enterprise systems at the bottom, like we said, and they are, you talk to a typical enterprise customer, what we find is that they will tell us that they have everything, right? They have SQL databases that they need access to. They have information residing in enterprise service buses that they need to access. They have information exposed via API management tools that they need access. They have identity across multiple systems, including SAML or LDAP-based systems that they need access to. They have a SOA architecture internally on some subset of their systems, and you need access to those services via SOAP and XML. And then they may have some very customized REST services that are available that they have built to exchange data between applications. And at the top, you have the device SDKs and tools and a very large application development team, typical of a very large enterprise, where in order to build these apps and build them quickly, they engage with lots of contractors to build the applications, and this very large application team needs the flexibility to be able to develop on platforms and languages that they are familiar with, and so that might be in HTML5, or it might be in C# using a tool like Xamarin, or use PhoneGap, or do native iOS and Android or Windows phone development. So without mBaaS, you'd have to separately deal with all of these requirements. For example, how do I manage users? How do I connect users to the SAML system within my enterprise as well as their social identities? How do I build that? So you'd have to write that code yourself, maintain it, manage it, test it. The client UI, the client user experience features, right? Some examples of this that we talked about. How do I cache data, and in order to comply with the security requirements within the enterprise, I want to encrypt this data and encrypt it in a certain way. And you'd have to write the code to do that. Again, remember, you'd have to do this across each one of your apps, across every one of the platforms that you want to make this application available with. For new data that your mobile app stores and wants to be able to retrieve, you need some type of data store, and you'd have to create that, provision the infrastructure for that, do it securely, and worry about things. Your IT folks are going to be worried about things like high availability and disaster recovery of this data store. You'd have to separately build engagement features like push, SMS notifications, email notifications to the users of your application. You'll need some type of PaaS or platform as a service environment that enables you to build backend business logic that is customized for your mobile application. And the reason you need a platform as a service environment is it gives you the ultimate flexibility and power to do anything that you want with these. Some people are calling these microservices for mobile applications, right? To be able to build these microservices specifically to meet the needs of the mobile applications. And authorization to data, right? This is important again for the enterprise use case where you want to ensure that the users of the mobile app actually are authorized to access the data and they follow the access controls that are already in place with your authentication system to enable them to access that data and do the opposite, which prevent access when they don't have access. And again, microservices that you can do to modify data specifically to meet the needs of your application. For example, when saving a piece of data, you may want to do something special that is unique to that particular piece of data. Well, how can I do that very securely and quickly, right? And you use data microservices to do that. You have to build that. And finally, when you have all of these different services that you're using for your mobile apps, you need to be able to provision it, scale it, monitor it, manage it, make it highly available, and so on. And you'd have to find some tools and services to do analytics, to understand how people are using your application, how the application is performing, if the application is secure, be able to collect data for audit tracking purposes if you're in a compliant environment. So these are some of the requirements that without mBaaS, you would have to build separate services. You would have to write a lot of code, engage with your infrastructure people to be able to not just build or acquire these services independently, but also to manage, maintain, and scale them, and again, do them across all your application, across all your platforms. With mBaaS, so what this looks like without mBaaS is basically building what I call a kit car, right? So you get a kit of parts and you can build this car. Next time you want to build a car, you order another kit and you build it all over again. And you just have a bag of parts, and it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. And finally, you need a lot of expertise to be able to do this and do this well and create and have a quality product at the end of the day. And you need obviously all the tools in place to enable you to do to work with these bag of parts. What you get with mBaaS, with an mBaaS solution like Inway or others that are out in the market, are reusable components first. So you don't have to do this over and over again for every application, for every platform that application supports. So you get all these features we talked about: user management, engagement services, push notifications, email notifications. On the client side, the ability to do offline caching, to be able to encrypt that cache, to be able to synchronize data, all without having to write much code at all. Sometimes it's a single line of code to, for example, log in. We have a set of pre-built services that are available, and they are available on demand. And they are scaled for you automatically. They are managed for you automatically. They are monitored for you. And the mBaaS provides, because it's available as a service, it provides the SLA guarantee to this. And then all the connections into your enterprise systems of record, right? So you have standardized ways to connect to your enterprise systems of record. So all of this is provided with the mBaaS solution. So now we fulfill all of the tiers that are required for mobile apps, and now all of a sudden you have a factory, right? You have a factory that can churn out these apps like you're churning out cars along an assembly line, and you're no longer dealing with a bag of parts. So if you look closer at API management and mBaaS and how this all comes together in the context of what we just talked about, and again, we'll make it real with a little demo here. So again, we always set the foundation at this bottom layer, right, where you have these enterprise systems or enterprise applications and services that are available. And at the top, you have this mobile context tier, right? And you want to do this at mobile speed, which means you want to do that really fast, and you have the aggregation tier and your systems of record. And the speed is really realized because you want a decoupled architecture, and this is what API together with mBaaS enables, right? Where on one side, you can operate at very high speed, at mobile speed, mobile methodology in terms of a very agile, continuous delivery methodology. And then on the other side of this line, you can operate much more deliberately, adhering to compliance, adhering to stability requirements, reusability requirements that you need from an IT perspective. And the layers that enable this are at the top in the mobile context tier. You have a business logic layer, right, where, like I said earlier, you have these pre-built templates or services that enable you to do pre-post hooks on data. So every time you either are fetching data, saving data, deleting data, updating data, you can perform things to that data, for example, filtering the data or performing some logic on this data, and be able to do that easily with the templates provided in the mBaaS layer. And the unique thing here is that you can do this at mobile speed. You can do this without impacting the underlying services on the other side of this line that are connecting to your enterprise systems of record. There is also a layer that will demo to you here, which we are calling rapid microservices that enable you to leverage REST services that are available from your systems of record via a service catalog, and be able to make modifications to those REST endpoints without having to write any code. And you can, again, the idea is to be able to do this at mobile speed and do this without affecting the underlying services on the other side of this line, which are encapsulated in a service catalog where you have out-of-the-box integrations to standard enterprise applications like an SAP or an Oracle, as well as enterprise integrations. For example, you may have an API management solution like a Layer 7 or an Apogee that you have bought, that you've integrated with certain enterprise applications, and therefore that application and that data is available through a RESTful service that you can make available via the service catalog to your mobile app developers, who then use these rapid microservices to quickly transform these endpoints to meet the needs of different mobile apps. So you may have this multiple mobile apps that are using the same API management service or endpoint, and each of these mobile apps may have a slightly different requirement, and you can fulfill those requirements with these transformations that are done just with UI configuration. So there is no code involved in being able to do this. In addition to that, you can also have these conveyed DLCs or data link connectors that you could build for other enterprise systems that are not connected through your API management solution, that the DLC then provides that wrapper and provides the abstraction as well as the data transformation and the integration with your XML system, so that these services are part of the service catalog, can be easily to your Git repo, which is already available as a REST service, and you can get access to that through the service catalog and be able to modify that using this rapid service or do further modifications using our business logic. So that's how all this comes together. And finally, what what mBaaS does is it brings this backend abstraction all the way to the client. Again, it doesn't matter what client you're developing to in terms of device type or platform type or language that you're using. As a front-end developer, the abstraction that you're seeing is one of data, right? So you're looking at data on these screens in these apps, and you don't need to know or be aware of the fact that this data is actually coming from an Oracle or a SAP or an API gateway or an API management solution. That is completely abstracted from you as a developer, which means that your app doesn't have to change when those services change or those endpoints that those services are connected to change, right? So that's the level of abstraction that the mBaaS brings to you, again, all the way down to the client with an SDK. So everything is abstracted down to data that you can deal with in the application, as opposed to thinking of it as APIs or endpoints. So what does this do really? Right, at the end of the day, you're saving time and money by whether you do it yourself and build all of these services, or you use mBaaS, or use mBaaS and API management to get even further acceleration, because some of this abstraction, some of the transformation and integration work is already performed for you, and it's automatically available, published in the service catalog for your mobile app developers to begin consuming and begin transforming further to meet the needs of the context here. So I'll show you a quick demo of an mBaaS console, so you can kind of relate back to reality, what I just talked about. So we'll go into an mBaaS console here. So this is the Kinvey mBaaS console. The landing page is simply a dashboard that shows you things, critical things about the application in terms of users, API calls. This particular sample app doesn't have a lot of activity that I just made for this webinar, so you don't see a lot of data up top, but it also shows you the thing I wanted to focus on here, which is the abstraction that the mBaaS provides, right? So you, as a developer, look at things in the form of these collections. These are just data, right? Again, you don't have to think about where this data is coming from. In fact, you could start developing your app. These collections that you see here, like apps and ATMs and bills and repos, are simply objects that you are dealing with in your client application. And you could start focusing on the UI and the user experience of your application without having to worry about whether the backend integration is ready or complete. And what you're able to do is to quickly select one of these collections, go to the settings for this collection, and associate this data with a data source. And notice that you can change that data source with a single click, right? In this particular case, this data is actually connected to a REST service, something that would typically be available via an API management solution, for example. I didn't use an actual API management solution, but I'm demonstrating this to you with another RESTful service that is very similar to what an API management solution would be, right? And as a client-side developer, again, you're simply dealing with this repos collection, and you don't know that there is a data source backing it, and that's actually a REST service, and that REST service is actually an API management solution. That's completely abstracted away when you look at this from the perspective of a mobile app developer on the client side. And this, we talked about how with the rapid microservice in the mBaaS layer, you're able to quickly make transformations to this REST service or these REST endpoints, right? So this is another part of the console where I can go to this REST service that I'm trying to connect to. I see the same repos endpoint that is mapped to this repos collection, and I can go change that, right? Right now, I'm able to discover all the fields that are available from this REST service, right? So there is a discovery feature, and I can change the mapping. So this tells you that here's the endpoint as exposed by the API management service, and here's what I want to map it to in terms of what a client app developer or a collection in the mBaaS would know it as, right? Same piece of data, same attribute. And I can also choose, what I want to include versus things I don't want to include, and simply, update the mapping and save it, save the configuration information, right? And go back to the API console part of this, to the mBaaS, right? And I can say, okay, here I want to get access to this repos collection, send the request, right? And I can see I'm collecting all of the attributes, right? So you see all of the attributes of this particular collection that's being shown here when I make the request. Now, let's say for my particular application, it's not feasible for me to, store all of this data, display all of this data in the screens. It doesn't make sense for me to do this, and I want to make a change, right? So I can go back in here, go back to the same REST endpoint that, again, this could be a API management service that's exposing this endpoint that multiple apps are using. And again, I don't want to change it for all the other users of this REST service. I only want to change it for my mobile application, and I can simply start filtering the data. So I can say, I don't want a lot of this. I don't want these avatars, URLs and other things. I'm just not interested in that, displaying that, and it doesn't make sense in my mobile app. So I can just start deselecting these, update the mapping, save it, save my configuration, right? It's saved successfully. Now if I, basically redo this request, you'll see some of those things that I filtered out don't show up. You don't see those avatar attributes and some of these other things we just unchecked. So this is how things work together. We showed you the different layers. Now going back to the PowerPoint presentation so I can correlate it for you back to what we showed you. I built this out. This is exactly what we showed you, right? The console I showed you where these rapid microservices, the service catalog where all of those services were available to me. I clicked on GitHub, which was the service I was using, a RESTful service, and I was able to, using Rapid, make quick transformations, again, specific to my mobile app. And there's a business logic layer as well, which we didn't get into, but that is also from that same console. You can write simple hooks to do interesting things when you save and fetch data and delete data and so on. So that was the demo. So just to summarize, right, this is the new enterprise mobile stack. API management, mBaaS coming together to fulfill, again, the needs of mobile applications and these new Internet of Things and wearables use cases. API management provides a secure, scalable, standardized access to these systems of record. And with mBaaS, you can get these mobile optimized features that are reusable, pre-built that enables you to meet the needs of the mobile app very quickly and in a very scalable, cost-effective way. So that's the end of the presentation. I believe at this point we have some time for questions.
Yeah. All right, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the questions tab. I've got a couple here already. So what is, you mentioned an API gateway. What's an API gateway? What's the difference between an API gateway and an API management?
So typically, API management solutions, you can use them, for example, in the cloud. So your API management platform resides in the cloud and it's available as a service, but it is actually providing an API to internal data that resides inside your firewall or internal applications that reside inside your firewall. And in order to securely expose that internal data or application to the outside world, some enterprises will install optionally an API, what is called an API gateway, that sits inside the firewall. It's typically either a hardware appliance or a virtual appliance, that mostly a virtual appliance that sits inside the firewall and connects to those internal systems of record, and then has a secure endpoint that is exposed through the firewall. So it's typically sitting in the DMZ of your internal network.
Great. Okay, I've got another question here, which is, can I create my own connectors to proprietary backend systems within Convey?
Yes. With Convey, we showed you here what's called a Convey DLC. And with the Convey DLC that is shown here in this picture in the bottom center, that's what you would use. It's called a Convey Data Link Connector, and we can provide this. DLC and the Convey mBaaS service is through a RESTful interface, so it's a secure REST interface to the outside. So obviously you'll need a TCP/IP transport layer connection back to the outside world.
All right, perfect. Let's see, any other questions here? Is there anything that API management does that mBaaS does not do?
So API management, like I said, addresses, there are a lot of non-overlap, if you will, in terms of the buying scenarios that we talked about up front, right? So API management is used for a number of other things besides mobile apps. So it's used to exchange data with other business partners, enable them to build their own applications or do intelligent things with that data. And therefore, those requirements drive features in API management that are distinct from mBaaS. For example, metering and billing, or user portals, API versioning, which there is some versioning in the abstraction provided in the mBaaS, but the needs in the API management world are slightly different. So yes, there is a non-overlap in terms of feature set between API management and mBaaS, just because the buying scenarios are different.
Okay, I've got a question here. Someone's asking specifically about the Seed Henry mBaaS platform, but I'm not sure that we have all the information there, just because we're experts more on Convey. But I guess to generalize the question a little bit, I'm going to ask, sorry, I'm just going to lock my question. So in general, are all mBaaS platforms, is there value for coupling API management with all mBaaS platforms, or is it specific to just us as an mBaaS provider?
Obviously we can't answer it for our competitors, as Caroline pointed out. We work with API management solutions. We don't require that people have to have API management solutions like you can see from this picture here. You can always connect through Kinvey data link connectors, and we provide a catalog of out-of-the-box integrations to standard enterprise applications. But obviously working together, it makes it quicker, cheaper, faster to get your mobile apps out the door.
Okay, great. Anyone have any more questions? Please feel free to ask. I've got one more that I've got here. What are the advantages or disadvantages of using API management versus using a Kinvey data link connector?
It's really, again, if your requirements are, more than just doing something with mBaaS and building a mobile app, right? That you want to expose these integrations for other purposes, business-to-business purposes, or building a community of developers that use these APIs and things like that. Then obviously API management is the right choice. If you're doing it purely to meet the needs of mobile app or IoT requirements that you're buying an mBaaS platform for, and your needs are just going to be that, then Kinvey DLC is the right choice.
Okay, great. So that actually wraps up all of our questions. So thank you so much, Taku, and thank you very much for everyone for attending, and we'll have the replay up in the next couple of days. And if you have any other questions that you want to shoot to us in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us at webinars@kinvey.com, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.